Team Hendrik Vervoort and Roger McCleary.
And a big welcome to Kyalami, the new Formula One Grand Prix circuit. You can't believe in 2 months a whole new circuit has been created here at Kyalami. But the competitors are the one that's important. Let's hear the opinions of this new circuit.
Probably the first circuit I've driven on that every 200 meters you face a major challenge. It's a marvelous circuit, and you get up to high speeds and you've got to slow down and take rather, you've got to be very brave to take some of these corners. I think it's a vast change from the old Kyalami.
I think it's one of the nicest tracks I've ever driven on. It reminds me a bit of Spa. It's a sort of a condensed version of Spa with all the ups and downs and the blind corners. And I really think it's a driver's track. It's probably the best track we've ever seen in this country. It's even better than the original old Kyalami. And it's a very precise track. You know, on the old track you could miss the corners or the apex by a yard or two, and you still could have a good time. But now, if you miss it by 6 inches, the time is gone. So I think it's really a driver's track, and I really must compliment Kyalami. It's a fantastic track. I'm very happy with it.
It is very hard on the car, but I think it's going to be a lot harder on the drivers mentally, because if you make a mistake, you're going to be punished. Whereas the old track, you could get away 1.5 meters either side of the given line. Yeah, you're either on the line or you're off in the sand trap. So it's going to be very punishing on the cars ultimately, but also on the drivers.
The tight corners are very tight, and the fast corners are fast. So you got a mixture of slow and fast. So it's you really got to concentrate.
None of the corners seem to be exactly the same, so you can't get into any rhythm, though, and they're all very, very interesting and exciting, certainly.
Yeah, fantastic. Very happy with the new circuit. Lots of very fast corners, very little runoff area. Very happy with the circuit.
Yes, it's nice and tight, and especially the new section at the back is something I've never experienced before. You need a big set of ironies to go around there quickly.
I think we've created quite a few extra passing points into the new Conti, the hairpin. There's an extra one. Into the pit straight is another one. Maybe even at the end of the pit straight. I think it's probably another 2 or 3, and I think you're going to see a lot more dicing than you did on the old track.
Yeah, it's actually compared to the old circuit, they've given you extra 2 places to pass. For the hairpins, you can get inside of a guy. And it's top of Wesbank, which is the same, but they definitely have given us more room to pass. And the track just seems wider. You know, you come onto the main straight in front of the pits, and it's like a four-lane highway.
And I must say it's incredible. There's the new pit complex, the press, the media centre there. They've got 42 pits. 8 weeks ago, there was nothing here. They've built a magnificent circuit. And to pass all these drivers, the varied drivers from Saul van der Merwe, has driven on tracks all around the world, it's incredible to hear. They just love the circuit. And we're going to take a little trip around the circuit in a moment or two. But there's all the work. It's waiting for you at the Yellow Pages Grand Prix on the 1st of March. But let's see what it's like to drive around the circuit. We're into a Works Audi. Take a trip round with Terry Moss.
We're approaching the pits bend now. We're back down from 5th to 2nd gear. We're about down from 250 k's to 80 k's. We're exiting the pits past the new Kyalami pits. That's 3rd gear, 4th gear, 5th gear, 7,500 RPM, 250 k's an hour. We're going down to the next right-hander. We're clipping the apex, and down to the next left-hander. We're apexing the total turn, approaching the new from 4th, approaching Nazia from 3rd, going back into 3rd gear. It's about 140 k's an hour. We accelerate up to 4th gear, 5th gear, 240, and we near about 260 k's as we enter into the right-hander. We're apexing now. In 4th gear, we'll be changing to 5th gear, approaching at 250 k's an hour, down to 3rd gear, hard brakes, exiting 7,500 RPM. Moving on to the first S, we'll have to brake hard after 240 k's an hour. 4th gear through there, we'll be exiting and on the apex with the 2nd S. We'll be moving over the left-hand side of the circuit. That's 5th gear over the horizon. We'll have to brake very, very hard here. As you can see, you can't see any circuit. Back down to 2nd gear. We're moving out of Wesbank now in 2nd. 7.5, 8,000 RPM. 3rd, 4th, 5th gear, nearing 260, 270 k's an hour, the fastest part of the circuit. As we're down the mine shaft, we're apexing on the left-hand side, moving down to the new Conti, hard on the brakes from 250 down to 80 k's an hour. 2nd gear, 8,000 RPM, we're moving into 3rd gear. fourth gear as we're getting to Caltech's corner, the most tricky corner in the circuit. We're clipping the apex, moving to the left-hand side as we move to the pits corner. Pits corner hard on the brakes, back down to second gear. 5,500 RPM, moving up to 7,500, 8,000 RPM. Past the pit straight, we're accelerating very hard at 250 k's an hour.
And that's terrifying stuff as you go around a Formula 1 Grand Prix circuit. That's the new one waiting for the Grand Prix here on the 1st of March. And what a capable motorcon, what a capable driver is Terry Moss, the Wesbank modified champion. So let's just have a look at the additional pass. Brilliant Straight is where the new circuit's going to start. We're using the old starting area here today. And then the very tight one in front of those pits. It's been increased to 4.2 kilometers in length. 400 meters have been added to the circuit. It's hot here this afternoon, a little bit of wind. Let's have a look at what sort of temperature we've got down on the circuit just before the modified race gets underway, the Wesbank cars.
Right, there we have it, the track temperature 43, touching 44 degrees Celsius. And that's quite a bit of heat we've got there. With me standing today and not in his racing overalls is Willie Hebburn. Willie, are you short of a pair of overalls? What's the problem?
Graham, no, I'm not short of a pair of overalls. I'm short of a sponsor for my racing car. Unfortunately, I don't have a sponsor this year, and I can't afford to run the car until I do get a sponsor. So if there's any sponsors out there looking for a place, my car's available. I'm busy building a new car, or intend building a new car, and I'd like to be here.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of your fans, if we have a look on the grandstands, will be sad to not see that big Opel out here today. What sort of money, Willie, are we talking about to run a vehicle like that?
To do it privately, as I've been doing it, we need about 750,000 a year, which is not much by the other team standards. They're running 3 and 4 million rand budgets compared to my 750. But I feel I can be up there competing with them successfully for that sort of money.
Well, it sounds like a 750 motorcycle. If there's a company out there who can help Willie Hebburn, we'd really appreciate it, because we'd love to see you out on the circuit again, Willie.
I'd like very much to be back. Thanks very much, Grab.
Thanks, Willie.
Well, it's going to be a loss not having Willie Hepburn there. Of course, he's given us such enjoyment over the years, Hepburn, so let's hope that whole thing comes together. As you see the good echoed car come on, that's a big V8 Chevy. He's been over in the States and getting some really hot parts into that motor car. Leaves black lines all over the circuit. All right, here's the grid. Oh, the grid is forming up here now. And on the left-hand side there, you can see the man on pole position. He chooses to go on that side, and that is Sarel van der Merwe. Alongside him, we've got the champion, Terry Moss, in the Minotaur Audi. So there it is, Sarel van der Merwe. He broke the 1:40 barrier. Very, very fast and most spectacular around the circuit. Yesterday, he was bringing gasp from the people as he circulated around Kyalami. Really, and he, as you heard just now, loves the circuit. Terry Moss is on the front row with him. He's the champion in car number 1, as you see. Chris Aberdeen is in the Bosel Audi. These cars are going to be replaced by later models a little bit later in the year. And there we have Ben Morgenrud on the second row. Let's just have a look at the pit complex. We're looking, there's that big, we call it the bungee corner there because of that big drop-off if you do make the mistake. But here it is. That has grown up in 2 months. Unbelievable, in just 8 weeks. There's Terry Moss going around the circuit. That's the new pit complex. There's all the commentary boxes just down below us here, down the Brilliant Straight. And then they'll be going right-hand down there through Total Give. And the Total Boma is on the first corner. Here he is coming into sight now. As they go through this right-hand, you can see they fly along here. The Total Boma is right at the end of the that leading straight with the whole Grand Prix field coming towards, which is going to be most exciting. Well, as always, Graham Cooper's down there, always talking, getting us the inside information. Let's see who he's got for us down on the Ben Morgenrud.
Thank you very much there, Ben Morgenrud. I see you've still got the same car here. Last year there were so many talks of new engines and everything. Tell us what's happened.
We're expecting to have had the 4-rotor engine by now, but there's been a delay in us obtaining the engine. Probably we will have the engine by, I would say, the middle of this year. May, June, July, down about there.
And will it fit into this car, Ben?
No, it won't fit into this car. We are going to have a new car built. It'll be a totally new car, and this will keep as a backup car.
That's fantastic. And tell me, Ben, the difference in speeds compared to the new 4-rotor engine?
Well, this engine makes 450 horsepower, and the 4-rotor engine will make 600 horsepower, which is more in line with what the turbo cars are making.
Absolutely incredible, and I'm sure that the Mazda fans will be out here in force to support you with that new rotor motor. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Well,
ten spyte van die feit dat hy 150 kilowatt of perkrag minder het as van sy ander teenstanders, is Ben Morgenrood nog steeds in die 4de wegspringposisie, ook een van die mees gewilde renjaars in Suid-Afrika. En dit gaan interessant wees om te sien hoe sy relatief klein Mazda motortjie hierdie nuwe baan gaan hanteer. Sy motor is waarskynlik 'n bietjie meer hanteerbaar en hy sal waarskynlik vinniger deur van die skerpe draai kan gaan. Onder weer eens by die wegspringrooster Graham Cooper saam met die 1991 Wesbank gemodifiseerde kampioen Terry Moss.
Well, thank you very much, Terry Moss. You took us around the circuit earlier on. You've just done your warm-up lap. Is everything ready? You've got Mr. Van der Merwe next to you. What's going to happen during this race?
Yeah, I'm very ready. This season I'm a lot more confident than last season, and relaxed. I'm going quickly. But Merwe is going about half a second quicker than I am. But I think when the race starts and we start pushing hard, good dice can develop. I think that's what the crowds are looking for. We need to give them some good road racing this year.
What sort of development work was done to your car over the period of the rest period?
Over the rest period, we didn't do much development on these cars because it was agreed that we'd run the same cars this year. We've been allowed a slightly bigger restrictor, so have all the other cars. The only major change has been the Ford they've given it 100 kilograms less on weight. And the acceleration, the new circuit, which is counting a lot on acceleration, we're a little bit of a disadvantage there.
The fact you're also carrying the onboard camera for us today, that you don't believe in all those stories that it's a bad luck omen.
No, I don't believe that, definitely not. I'm out there to win it again this year, and I want to enjoy it.
Well, I think that's what the viewers want to hear. Terry Moss, best of luck for 1992. Thank you.
Die motors wat reeds op die wegspringrooster hulle posisies ingeneem het, en binne enkele oomblikke gaan ons Suid-Afrika se toprenjaars, die toprenformule wat betref waarskynlik gewildheid onder die toeskouers, gaan ons hulle in aksie sien. Hierdie wedren gaan oor 8 rondes beslis word, in teenstelling met die 10 rondes van die ander formules, omdat daar twyfel is of hierdie motors wat soveel krag ontwikkel, se bande die volle afstand van 10 rondes, met ander woorde so 43 km sal kan hanteer. So 8 rondes wat ons hierdie motors in aksie gaan sien, en soos jy ook kan sien is die wegspringrooster nou verander na slegs 2 rye en nie 3 rye motors nie. Ons het slegs die 2 rye aan die 2 kante van die renbaan, aan die regterkant en aan die linkerkant. Niemand is meer in die middel nie. En dit gaan waarskynlik sake heel wat meer interessant maak met die wegspring.
Just one little thing, the one car that we're looking forward to seeing is the Opel Calibra that's being built for Delta. They're going to come out with a little bit later. With me is the motorsport manager of Delta Motorsport, Peter Laird. Peter, the developments on the Calibra, how far have you got with it?
Well, Roger, we're 99% of the way. The vehicle is coming on very nicely. It's in its final few hours of development. We should start testing the vehicle at the Killarney race circuit on Wednesday morning. The first day of testing will just be basically a shakedown test, and I would say by Monday week we'll be into full racing trim and testing the vehicle very hard.
So we'll see it at the Grand Prix meeting.
Well, that is our intention, to be at the Grand Prix meeting, and we're sure that we're going to be able to give the Opel fans a lot to talk about.
Well, that's good stuff. That's from Peter Laird, and the Opel Calibra in there to fight it out with these other hot machines of Wesbank modifieds. This is the heavy metal. They're going to do this warm-up lap, and they'll be into 8 laps. A little bit of there's Sorrel van der Merwe now, and lovely to hear these competitors all raving about the circuit, as you have heard. This is the reason for the delay. You can't start a race with a car at the side of the road. You've got to allow these drivers to have runoff areas, and that is the reason for the delay as they pull that car off the road. Right, we're getting underway now. The cars are moving off the line. As you can see, they'll be going left and right. They get the green flag there from the start finish. Flagman John Wheeler. There's a nice little car coming past Dave Repsol's C-Class Toyota. We'll just show you some of these cars. Sorrel van der Merwe on pole positions in the front there. Terry Moss in the black, the Minotaur Audis, they go around budget. That's the right-hander. And let's just show you the circuit as we go around here. They drop it down a gear here. Normally maybe just touch the brakes. The braver ones go through here almost flat out. The left-hander, Yellow Pages, the old clubhouse. 90-degree left-hander, then it's 350 meters to the first of the Top Sport S's. There you are. Hard acceleration here, normally on the right-hand side of the road, looking to get inside berth. Terry Moss once again. We're going to be, maybe we'll have the car maybe an open road ahead of him. We're going to see that one, or maybe we're going to see that Sasol Sapphire ahead there. That's Sorrel van der Merwe. Pink aerofoil there, pulling it down onto the road. Incredible to watch this man from the outside, learning the circuit, using all the curves, and going very, very quickly indeed. Sorrel van der Merwe, the Sapphire, it's a turbocharged two-wheel drive. The car that you're in at the moment is Terry Moss. He's in a four-wheel drive turbocharged 5-cylinder Audi, and as you've heard, they're going to be replaced a little bit later in the year, and hopefully maybe Graham Duxbury or Basil Manley here are going to be into these older Audis. They're incredible cars based on the Audi 500. They'll be launching a V6 motor car later this month, and then we'll be having the IMSA cars coming up. Sorrel van der Merwe, there's Terry Moss, Chris Aberdeen, Ben Morgan. That car sounds incredible. Put E-Coat is there. There's the first of the BMWs, and that's Dion Jubeir. He's put it across his teammate Tony Vion, who's only third in the grid. Gary Dunkley's there in the Sabat Porsche, that 3.3 litre Porsche Carrera. You see, very well driven motor car. It's on the left hand side of the road. Jubeir, there's Vion, third position. Larry Wolford, he went off before he'd completed a lap on the new circuit. And there's the big challenger. He's only fourth in the grid there in that class, and that is Johan Coetzee. You're going to see more of him in the Gearmax Skyline. He's certainly an aggressive driver. He pushes that Nissan Skyline just as hard as he can. He's 3 times Wesbank modified champion. He's also class champion in 1991. Sorrel van der Merwe, just see his wheel over the right-hand wing there of Terry Moss's car, left-hand drive. Those are Messerschmitt instruments he'll be looking at. He's got monitors monitoring everything, diff temperatures. Some of them even have tire temperatures are being monitored in the cockpit of the motor car. It's turbocharged. You hear the popping and squeaking a little bit later. This is total curve, and then they start climbing up the hill here to Nashua Corner. Just a quick note before we get underway. Anybody with Grand Prix tickets, get to CompuTicket this week or during the next couple of weeks to get a map of how to come into the circuit, how to park and make yourself comfortable at the Yellow Pages Grand Prix. And this is what Sen and the others are going to see. The self-same circuit. We're ready to go, 8 laps ahead of us. About 35 kilometers, the pace car's off. Who's going to get the jump? It's got to be van der Merwe. He gets away, he gets a car length already, and Sorrel van der Merwe, it means business this time. The Audis have been ruling the roost, and he wants to change all that into budget for the first time. Lovely camera shot from up high here as they accelerate towards Yellow Pages, heavy on the brakes. Got a line up there, you can't take a chance in these cars. In with Moss, in the works Audi, nothing between the two cars, they accelerate away. Sorrel van der Merwe hasn't got a little touch on the dab on the brakes. Tight into that corner, he's also going to keep him out there. Now he starts to accelerate, you can hear him there, accelerating up the Winfield Hill flat out. As they're going onto the brake markers, you can't see the corner, and they just suddenly arrive, heavy on the brakes. Morgan Rood's in 4th spot, just settling down, getting those tyres warmed up. Van der Merwe's out first, and Moss is looking for the inside berth. He's not going to follow him down the road, he's got it. He comes down the road, this is going to be a brave move, he stays on the road. On the inside here, this is a flat-out corner for Van der Merwe. Just cuts across his bows there, goes for the inside. He's got a defensive line there, keeps him out on the inside of Continental Tire corner. This is the new one, and very quickly out of there. Lots of runoff area. There's a dicey one now, there's the new Caltex curve. So he knows now where he's going to attack from. Sorrel van der Merwe, he knows Terry Moss is there. He's got Aberdeen on his tail, and the Bosel, the red Bosel car. And Morgan Rood's just behind them. And we see E-Coat a little further back. But it's these 4 A-class cars later in the year to be challenged by the Opel Calibra Michael Briggs, as you heard from Peter Laird, being prepared in Cape Town, in Killarney, in Oden Ashley's workshop, to come and do battle here. And this is where Van der Merwe is fast. He goes through there, he just lifts and puts his foot down, absolutely flat out, and Chris Aberdeen is through as well. So Moss has really got to settle in here. He's the champion in this class, but Sorrel van der Merwe so far is giving them a driving lesson. Aberdeen is on his way through. You've got to watch you don't come too close on this one. You start to overheat your motors. So Aberdeen wants after, he says, move over and let me get at him. You can't let Sorrel van der Merwe get away this way. But it looks like they are. And coming up on his tail, on Terry Moss's tail, he's going for that inside berth, that Yellow Pages. He's got it. He saved his 2nd position, but Aberdeen knows where he can pass him now. Sorrel van der Merwe knows there's a challenge coming from those 4-wheel drive Audis, but he's got that tremendous acceleration coming out of Crosby corner, and Sorrel's got the bit between his teeth, and how?
Ja, Roger, ons het net gesê dat die wedren verkort is tot 8 rondes as gevolg van twyfel oor die uithouvermoë van die motor se renbande. Ek wil miskien hier in die begin van die wedren die vraagstelling van 'n Merwe nie dalk hier te vinnig begin jaag aan die begin van die wedren en gaan sy bande dit uithou. Ons moet in gedagte hou dat die 2 Audi Quattro motors 4-wiel aandrywing het en dat daar nie so hard soveel druk op hulle bande natuurlik uitgeoefen word as die 2-wiel aangedrewe voor 604 Sapphire van Sorrel van der Merwe. Het bly nog steeds 'n baie interessante stryd hierdie. Dis 'n kritiese vraag, mense moet dit sien. wat gebeur aan die einde van hierdie wedren. Maar Terry Mas beslis nou terug na die tweede posisie en stewig ook. Daar is so 2 sekonde verskil tussen Van der Merwe en Terry Mas. Terry Mas weet dat hy vir Chris Aberdeen kort saak het. Ben Morgenrood in sy Mazda met die 3-rotor engine sit net en wag vir enige van hierdie voorste manne om 'n fout te begaan of vir enigiets om tegnies verkeerd te loop met daardie motors. En dan is hy gereed om toe te slaan en daardie posisie by hulle oor te neem. Dit gaan die einde van die tweede ronde wees. Die volgorde bly steeds dieselfde. Ons gaan dit vir u vinnig gee. As hulle by ons verbykom, dis Sarel van der Merwe, dan is dit Terry Mas en dis Chris Aberdeen. Daar is absoluut niks tussen hulle nie. Dan is dit Ben Morgenrood. Hy is so 2,5 sekondes verder terug. Johnny Eekhout is daar in die 4de posisie. Dion Jubeir loop voor in klas B op die oomblik met Gary Dunkley tussen hom en sy spanmaat Tony Viana. En dan in klas C is dit Dave Repsol, Keith Carr en Pat Duckham wat sake uitspoor. Verder terug in klas D het ons vir Richard Sorensen en Ray Wolfer, die manne wat soveel jare lank nou al teen mekaar jaag in daardie klas. En wat sake uitspoor om die eerste posisie in klas D. Maar ons aandag is plus gevestig hier op hierdie stryd om die tweede posisie tussen die Minotaur Audi van Terry Mas. Hy is die huidige kampioen. Dis waarom hy motor nommer A1 het. A staan vir klas A, 1 staan vir die huidige kampioen. En Chris Aberdeen wat die laaste helft van die vorige seisoen waarskynlik onder spanbevele moes jaag en Terry Mas die geleentheid moes gee om die kampioenskap agter sy naam te skryf omdat hy reeds 'n redelike voorsprong in die punte gehad het. Sal graag dit wil omkeer. Dis die eerste wedren van die jaar en daar is absoluut geen spanbevele in die Audi span nie. In hierdie stadium van die seisoen minstens nog nie. En sowel Mas as Chris Aberdeen gaan absoluut hulle uiterste probeer om hierdie wedren te wen. Sarel van der Merwe 'n gemaklike voorsprong aan die einde van die vorige ronde was dit 3,5 sekondes tussen Van der Merwe en Terry Mas. En Ben Morgenrood lyk vir my die probleem. Hy het waarskynlik iewers iets vasgery. Miskien het iets opgetel. Daar's 'n rempyp op 'n ding wat los is daar aan die agterkant van sy motor en dit gaan sy vertoning beslis beïnvloed. Van die derde ronde Sarel van der Merwe nog steeds voor. Sassel Ford Sapphire. Hy wag ook vir 'n nuwe motor. Waarskynlik later die jaar gaan hy 'n splinternuwe motor kry wat nog heelwat meer verder gaan ontwikkel. Hy het natuurlijk die gewigvoordeel ook vandag. Soos wat ons gehoor het, 100 kg ligter wat hy vandag geweeg is gewoonlik. Maar ek dink hierdie vertoning hier is absoluut uit die boonste rang. Sarel van der Merwe, een van Suid-Afrika se mees suksesvolle renjaars van alle tye, waarskynlik die mees bekende. En op sy hakke het hy nog steeds vir Terry Mas, wat dat iets los is op sy valhelm. En Chris Aberdeen wat besig is om so klein bietjie verder terug te sak. Ben Morgenrood nog heel wat verder terug. So 5, 6, 7 secondes as ons nou reg getel het tussen Chris Aberdeen en Ben Morgenrood.
And Terry Mas has had quite a race so far in the 3 laps that this race has been on. It's going to be a total of 8. There's Paddy Driver's car, the RGR manager at the side of the road there. It's unusual to see Paddy Driver retiring. He's been in motorsport for something like 35 years. But Mas has been to the front. He's been past, or he's been very close to Van der Merwe. He has been in front. He's been in second position. He's been in third, and he currently lies second at the moment. So he's settling down to his work. But at the moment, Sarel van der Merwe is giving them a driving lesson. There's no doubt about this combination of the Springbok, of the Ford Sapphire and Sassel. He's up front and they're not going to catch him. Barring mechanical problems, and this is where Van der Merwe is fantastic. He doesn't lift as he comes down through here, absolutely flat out through that right-hander. And then he just lifts it. Looks like a brake pipe or maybe something underneath the motor car there. It's not helping Ben Morgenrood, that's for sure. Nice performance there by Chris Aberdeen in third position, but he's got an aggressive Terry Mas ahead of him. Sarel van der Merwe is now leading by just on 3,3 seconds. He's got a bit as they come past some of the bit between his teeth as they come past some of the back markers in this race. Are into the slow cars already, and they've just done 4 laps. It's Van der Merwe and it's Mas, and there's Aberdeen following them as they come around there. Coming up there on the D-class cars, and here we are. The B-class dice is on. 16 years in the pictures. Tony Viana's Dion Jubeir from Cape Town and number 17. These are the Works BMWs. 3.5 litre 5 Series. They really rock it around here. We could see too close to them. In fact, he's not in the picture at all. It's Gary Dunkley, the one who's giving chase. He's just behind him, just coming into view now in that Sabre Porsche. But it's the BMWs, 1 and 2 here. It's Jubeir, and then it's Tony Viana. That's how it was on the starting grid. We haven't got Johan could see him here at all. So he's gone missing in this one. We missed him somewhere around the circuit. But here's the BMWs ruling the roost in Class B. These for cars up to 3,8 litres. And beautifully turned out are these two. Underneath they're is certainly different. One is prepared in Cape Town by Owen Ashley. The other one's done by Beyond up here in the Free State. We're in with Moss as he gets past the back market. This is the pits corner, commonly called bungee corner by the drivers. There's a sheer drop just on the outside of this corner. Here's the speed now. Let's have a look as we go down to Terry Moss. Does he lift? He keeps his foot down. Keep left. Gets past the pit exit. Flat out through here. He'll just be lifting down. He's got Aberdeen on his tail. He lets it slide out with that four-wheel drive. Gets it back under control and accelerates up the hill there. The same come past there. The slower cars. Sportingly letting them all come through. But it's Van der Merwe. There he is at the moment. He comes popping and squeaking, and I think he's getting closer. Is Terry Moss. The gap was, 3.5 seconds. It is now down to 2 seconds, and we've got a race on our hands, and Van der Merwe knows it. He's slipping and sliding as they come round budget. He wants past these slow cars so quickly, but Terry Moss is starting to speed up and is getting closer. As we go into the second half of this race, 5 laps are gone. We've got 6, 7, and 8 to do, and this race will be over. And Moss is pushing that Audi to its limit and beyond as he closes on Sarel Van der Merwe. Van der Merwe will be looking at temperature gauges. He can feel his tyres are starting to go off. It's been a hard race for him. Going off means they stop losing their grip, or they start losing their grip on the road, and they start to slip and slide all over the place. And he's got his boost turned right up. There's the leader now of the D class. That's Richard Sorensen, the class champion. Very fine little performer in that motor car. As Terry Moss closes, this could be the winner. Sarel Van der Merwe takes a tighter line. He's taking the shortest possible route he can around the circuit. He looks in his mirror, and there's the black Minotaur Audi on its way. Only around this corner. This is lap 6. We've got this lap 7 and 8 to do, and Moss is closing. Has Van der Merwe blown it? Has he overdone it with his tyres? He's got a lot of experience as he comes down here flat out. They're doing 260 kilometers an hour as they come towards us. Aberdeen is in there too. Maybe both those Audis will come past for a while to go. Van der Merwe thrives on these windy bits. He's incredible to watch going around these slower corners. He wants past. He'll be safe and kid.
Special and the Wesbank Modified Saloon Car Championship. After that, some skateboarding. And don't forget, at 7:30, all the results from today's horse racing in See How They Run.
No category of motorsport in South Africa in 1992 proved more popular than the Wesbank Challenge for modified saloon cars. The big bangers of South African motorsport pulled in the crowds throughout the country. The machinery was high-tech and expensive. There was controversy, there were incidents aplenty, and the series never lacked for action and entertainment.
We've had very good racing in all classes. And I don't see any need for changing the rules for next year at all. Very good.
The season kicked off at Kyalami early in February. The Midrand circuit still had the look of a construction site, with work pushing ahead for the Yellow Pages South African Grand Prix just a month away. Sarel Van der Merwe gave the Sasol team victory in the opening heat, and then the heavens opened and played into the hands of the Audi cars, driven by Chris Aberdeen and reigning Wesbank champion Terry Moss. Conditions were treacherous, but four-wheel drive gave the Audis a massive advantage. After an opening flurry from Sarel Van der Merwe, the two Audis completely dominated proceedings. The revamped Kyalami circuit, lengthened by 400 metres for the Grand Prix, was being used for the first time, and unfamiliar territory in dreadful conditions made life more difficult for the drivers. two Audis dominant, the major focus was on a tremendous battle for third between Sarel van der Merwe and Ben Morgenrood. Van der Merwe is a master in wet, but there are few more determined drivers around than Morgenrood. Down in Class B, the two dealer team BMWs being driven by Tony Viana and young Tony and Dion Jubeir had their hands full with a challenge from Italian Pat Duckham in the Ford Sierra. The BMWs were being forced to tippy-tappy around the wet circuit, and Duckham was in his element. The Van der Merwe-Morgenrood scrap continued to grab the attention with both drivers skating around the surface.
It is the most popular formula, without doubt, and I can only see it going and getting better. This is what the public wants to see. They want to see cars with horsepower. They want to see cars that make a noise. They want to see cars that have a lot of top end. They want to see the blood and guts.
In his eagerness to get to grips with Van der Merwe, Morgenrood was having an adventurous outing in the Mazda 323. While that battle was in progress, Chris Aberdeen in the Bosel Audi was slowly closing in on teammate Terry Moss in the Minotaur car. After lapping Class D leader Richard Sorensen in the Volkswagen Golf, Aberdeen was moving in for the kill. Although the rain had eased, conditions were still treacherous and overtaking manoeuvres had to be carefully planned and executed. Aberdeen's chance finally came when Moss missed a gear and he surged past his teammates. There is no more aggressive driver in the country than Terry Moss, but with race distance rapidly running out and conditions still difficult, the Port Elizabeth driver had little chance of making up the leeway, and Aberdeen coasted to victory. Behind the Audi, the battle between Van der Merwe and Morgenrood went all the way to the wire. Van der Merwe used all his wet-weather expertise and vast experience to hold off a determined Morgenrood in a grandstand finish. The Drivers' Championship after the opening round at Kyalami gave an early indication that it was going to be a closely fought season. On the manufacturer's side, there was a good start for Volkswagen. The Wesbank Circus moved to Cape Town and the picturesque Killarney circuit for round 2 of the series. There are no more knowledgeable or vociferous motor racing fans in South Africa, and upcountry competitors always enjoyed the trip to the Cape. The big news in Cape Town was the debut of the much talked about locally developed Opel Calibra, to be driven by Mike Briggs.
The project took about 2.5 months to design. I would like to have had longer time, but because of the money that's been put in, the company obviously want a return pretty quickly, so you can't spend a year designing it and then start to build it. So it took 2 months to design and then 4 months to construct.
The Audi pair of Chris Aberdeen and Terry Moss picked up where they left off at Kyalami. Aberdeen took pole position from Moss, but at the start it was Briggs who came charging through in the Calibra with some superb race cam action. The Audis were out in front as they came steaming down the main straight for the first time. The Calibra was right there with them, but there were problems up ahead for young Briggs. Chris Aberdeen was starting to take control when the race was stopped after a major oil spill on the circuit from a blown motor. Aberdeen in the Bosel Audi led the cars away on the restart amidst a curtain of dust from cement thrown down to soak up the oil. Aberdeen quickly took control once again and coasted to his second successive victory. Also of interest in Cape Town were new Wesbank tyre regulations.
In Class A, the tyres you qualify on, you must do the first race on. You can use whatever you like for the second race. In Class B, C and D, You're limited to 6 tyres per race meeting.
The second heat produced plenty of controversy. The Audi pair, Chris Aberdeen and Terry Moss, wasted no time in going to the front and were once again making full use of the four-wheel drive advantage on a tight circuit. Behind them, Ben Morgenrud, after a clash with Moss in the cement dust during the first heat restart, was running minus much of the Mazda's bodywork and was later to be disqualified. Sarel van der Merwe's day ended with turbo failure. Chris Aberdeen also found himself the victim of mechanical gremlins, with the Audi slowing dramatically and headed for retirement. The experienced Tony Viana and protégé Dion Jubeir had resumed their battle in Class B in the BMWs, with local hero Serge Damso taking control of proceedings in Class C in the new Toyota Sprinter. Richard Sorensen was again in charge of Class D in the Volkswagen Golf, with Terry Moss scoring his first win of the season. At the end of round 2, Terry Moss and Tony Viana led the Drivers' Championship. They were followed by Dion Jubeir, Chris Aberdeen and veteran Gary Dunkley. In the Manufacturers' Championship, Volkswagen was starting to forge ahead of BMW. Next up on the Wesbank calendar was a trip to the Goldfields Raceway, halfway between Velkom and Woodendalsrus, for round 3 of the championship. With the longest straight in the country and an abrasive track surface, Goldfield provides drivers and teams with a unique challenge. Sarel van der Merwe put the Sassel 4 Tafai in pole position, with the race cam mounted and Chris Aberdeen's Bosel Audi providing a bird's eye view of a race driver settling down to business in a very noisy office. The Class A Big Bangers touch speeds of 300 kilometers an hour down the Goldfield Straight. It is no place for the faint of heart. The battle had once again been resumed in Class B between BMW teammates Dion Jubeir and Tony Viana. This time it was Jubeir leading Viana on his home circuit. With Serge Damso giving Velkom a miss, it was Dave Repsol who had taken charge of Class C in the Automark Toyota Corolla. Mechanical problems reared their ugly head where Sarel van der Merwe was concerned.
I think it's the turbo that went. Just lost all boost. And it ended up being slower than a City Golf.
Supervan was not amused, but out on the circuit, all the going was well for race leader Terry Moss in the Minotaur Audi. Teammate Chris Aberdeen was not so fortunate.
I've been talking about this for a long time. We've got to try and get the Class E cars and the SO cars in a different race because the differential makes it too dangerous for the guys to pass.
Aberdeen's clash with the slower Class D car sparked a controversy that was to last all season. While a disgruntled Aberdeen headed for the pits, teammate Terry Moss was on the way to a comfortable victory in the Minotaur Audi. Between heats, there was frantic activity in the BMW pits, with mechanics changing the engine in Tony Viana's car. With Terry Moss in pole position for the second heat, we again pick up the early action from the race car mounted on Chris Aberdeen's car. Moss quickly jumped into an early lead, but behind the Class A cars, Dion Jubeir and Tony Viana were at it once again in the BMWs in Class B. Viana was trying all he knew to get past the young Capetonian. The Opel Calibra was still experiencing teething problems, and Mike Briggs was finding the cars something of a handful.
Driving an uncompetitive car, and I'm trying to do the best that I can with it. The only way we can stay with the other guys is to drive the car over the limit.
The Class C battle was once again being dominated by Dave Repsol in the Toyota, with Richard Sorensen ruling the roost in Class D. Over the last couple of laps, Ben Morgenrud started to close in on Moss, but the Audi driver grabbed his second win of the day. After his 2 wins in Velkom, Terry Moss had opened up a slight cushion over Dion Jubeir and Tony Viana in the Drivers' Championship. Chris Aberdeen was also in the running, but had ground to make up. In the Manufacturers' Championship, BMW had closed the gap on Volkswagen with a good battle developing between Audi and Toyota. Rounds 4 and 5 of the Wesbank Challenge were held at the Midvaal circuit and Elders Grabanti in Port Elizabeth. Then it was back to the reef for the 6th round at the Swartkop track just outside Pretoria. The shortest championship circuit on the Wesbank calendar, Swartkop's promised to produce plenty of action. With the track short and narrow, the classes were split up. Serge Damso and Dave Repsol immediately got to grips with one another in the first heat for classes C and B. Damso is one of the most versatile drivers in the country, but the South African rally champion experienced a few problems when he returned to track racing.
I wasn't very welcome in the beginning. Of course, I think it was just disturbing, the whole thing, but I think towards the end we sort of got together. And
the Damso-Repsol battle came to a premature end when Repsol hit a curb and deranged the Corolla suspension. This left Damso out in front in his own car for a comfortable win, and he was immediately back in charge in the second heat. Damso and the dealer team sprinter always had the legs in Keith Carr in the Volkswagen Golf, George Besaidnote in the aging Nissan Sentra, and veteran Richie Jubeir in the BMW. Cape Townian Steve Wyndham had taken control of Class D in the Automark Toyota Corolla, but was later to be disqualified for a technical infringement. Richard Sorensen was leading the challenge from the other Class D frontrunners, where some close racing had developed. It was all too easy for Damso, who cruised to a comfortable win to score a double for the day. But it was a battle for the big guns in classes A and B that the crowd had come to see. On the tight Swartkop's layout, it was going to be action all the way. The Audi pair of Terry Moss and Chris Aberdeen again dominated the front row of the grid, and there was some heavy metal charging for the first corner. We pick up the action from Chris Aberdeen's race cam. On the short and narrow Swartkop track, the Audis again had a huge advantage via their four-wheel drive. Aberdeen was soon in front of Sarel van der Merwe and the rear-wheel drive Ford, and set off after teammate Moss, who was hard at work. Van der Merwe and Willie Hepburn were doing their best to keep in touch with the two Audis, but there was high drama when Moss suddenly slowed. Racecam action tells the story. Moss managed to get going again, but not before Van der Merwe and Hepburn had sailed past. Now the Audi driver had a chase on his hands. The BMW pair of Tony Viana and Dion Jubeir had their hands full with Gary Dunkley in Class B. The Dunkley Porsche 911 was the meat in the BMW sandwich before ominous puffs of smoke from the back of the Porsche signalled a clutch problem and the end of the race. Terry Mast now had the bit between his teeth in the Rothmans Audi. He picked off Willie Hepburn in the Sabat Opel record and then had the crowd on its feet as he honed in on Sarel van der Merwe. The Audi made short work of the fall. Teammate Chris Aberdeen took the checkered flag and Moss had an explanation for his earlier problem.
I think probably a small electrical fault. I flicked the switches and it got going again. And I had a nice chase, which I think everyone wanted to see.
The second heat saw the Audis on the front row of the grid once again, with poleman Chris Aberdeen upstaged by teammate Moss. The race cam tells the story as Moss storms past on the outside. Sarel van der Merwe also managed to force his way past Aberdeen, and then history repeated itself. Once again, Moss suddenly slowed, found himself relegated from leader to third, and again had to do some chasing. With no Gary Dunkley to worry about, the Tony Viana and Dion Jubeir BMWs were having matters all their own way in Class B. It was an anxious moment for Chris Aberdeen when Sorrel van der Merwe missed a gear. It called for swift, evasive action from Aberdeen, but also gave Moss the opportunity to move up to second place. The BMWs looked as though they were tied together with a piece of string, but ahead of them more drama was unfolding. An inspired Moss had closed in on van der Merwe and once again had the crowds on their feet as he closed in for the kill. Making full use of the Audi's four-wheel drive superiority, Moss dived in on the outside of the Sassel Ford and was back in front after a tremendous drive. In a high-speed dash for the line, van der Merwe held off Aberdeen to snatch second place. Terry Moss was comfortably leading the Drivers' Championship. Tony Viana had a cushion over the BMW teammate Dion Jubeir. Chris Aberdeen and Sorrel van der Merwe made up the top five, with BMW and Volkswagen comfortably ahead of Toyota in the manufacturer's standings. The Wesbank Challenge reached the halfway stage with the Yellow Pages Winter Challenge meeting at Kyalami. The season was at a stage when every point was now crucial for championship challenges. Terry Moss did his hopes no good with a crash during practice that ruled him out on the Rothmans Audi on race day. The Audi challenge was left in the hands of Chris Aberdeen and the Bosel car. Aberdeen was caught unawares early in the race when Sorrel van der Merwe picked up an unlikely place to pass and nip past the Audi going into the Top Sport S's. Mike Briggs in the Opel Calibra and Ben Morgenrud in the Mazda 323 were locked in a tremendous tussle in the battle for third and fourth. The Calibra was belching out puffs of black smoke, but was very quick in a straight line. Aberdeen was throwing the Audi around in an effort to catch van der Merwe, and Morgenrud finally managed to muscle his way past a stubborn Briggs who fought every inch of the way. Down in Class D, it was Richard Sorensen versus Steve Corner, with the controversy over the slower cars still raging.
The best we can possibly do is just to show the Class A cars which way to go when they're coming up behind you. But if they do something rash, there's nothing we can really do to avoid a collision. But it happens, you know, it's racing. And with cars going so fast compared to the Class D cars, which are much slower, incidents like that are bound to happen.
He too saw Sorrel van der Merwe in pole position, with Chris Aberdeen struggling with a turbo problem that saw him drop a place to Mike Briggs early. Van der Merwe was controlling matters from the front, but behind the Class A cars, it was once again a story of BMW against BMW in Class B, with Dion Jubeir growing in confidence. In Class C, Dave Repsol and Serge Damso were still the men to beat, in the occasional interference from George Mercedes, Keith Carr and Richie Juta. Dion Jubeir eventually broke away in Class B, but up ahead there was drama. Morgenrud and van der Merwe touched in the Top Sport S's, and the unfortunate Mike Briggs was given the fright of his life. The slow-motion camera shows just how close Briggs came to a major shunt with Morgenrud. Wake-up time for Briggs, and if that wasn't close, we give up. With van der Merwe long gone and Aberdeen struggling, Briggs and Morgenrud continued their little contretemps all the way to the line. Briggs just made it in the Calibra's best outing so far, but van der Merwe drove away with a double for the day. On the championship front, it was a disaster for Terry Moss, who was relegated to third place behind Tony Viana and Dion Jubeir in the drivers' standings. In the manufacturers' championship, Volkswagen was still chasing BMW, with Toyota in third place. The return trip to the Goldfields Raceway for round 8 of the Wesbank Series produced another meeting loaded with drama and controversy. Spring was in the air, but there was not much charity to be found among the teams and drivers out on the track. The atmosphere appeared to be relaxed, but there were some fired-up drivers on the grid. Ben Morgenrud put the Mazda 323 on pole position for the first heat, and it did not take long for drama to unfold. After a lean spell in the Sabre Porsche 911, Gary Dunkley was hoping for a return to form in Class B. Dunkley and Johan Coetzee in the Nissan Skyline were keen to end the BMW domination. Castrol Corner, the tight right-hander at the end of Welkom's main straight, always provides for plenty of action. A rare mistake from Sarel van der Merwe, contesting the corner with Terry Moss, saw Superman slide off in the Sassel Ford Sapphire. Down in Class B, Johan Coetzee was the meat in the BMW sandwich with Dion Jubeir out in front. Ben Morgenrud was in the lead and going like a train in the Mazda when he too was the victim of an error of judgment. Mike Briggs put the Calibra into the lead for the first time during the season. Terry Moss also went past, and in Class C, the talented Serge Damso was once again fighting it out with Dave Repsol. Another Cape Townian, Steve Wyndham, was at the head of Class D field. This time, Richard Sorensen, although leading the class championship, was cast in the role of having to do the chasing. Terry Moss looked relaxed enough in the cockpit of the Rothmans Audi, but was under pressure from Morgenrud, who had made a good recovery after his off-road excursion. Morgenrud was not to be denied his first win of the season, and then grabbed the early lead in the second heat that will long be remembered. At the end of the main straight, Moss made his move, and race cam action shows how he slipped ahead of Morgenrud. There was also a race cam in the Dave Repsol Automark Toyota. Repsol was once again locked in a battle with Serge Damso and was given a little nudge by Keith Carr behind him, just as a little reminder. Dion Jubeir and Tony Viana were at it again in the dealer team BMW 535s, with Johan Coetzee putting pressure on the BMs. Being a race driver can be hard work. Steve Wyndham was once again out in front in Class D, with Richard Sorensen once more doing the chasing. A tremendous battle had developed for the lead between Terry Moss and Sarel van der Merwe. Then came an horrific 300km/h accident, from which van der Merwe was lucky to emerge with minor injuries. We take another look at the incident through the race cam mounted on Moss's car. Debris on the circuit was a legacy of the accident, with Johan Coetzee and the Gearmax Nissan Skyline once again the meat in the BMW sandwich in Class B. In Class E, the battle was still raging between Serge Damso and Dave Repsol, with Damso having to pull out all the stops to stay ahead of his arch-rival. Untroubled by all the drama around him, Ben Morgenrud completed his best day of the season with his second victory. He was followed to the checkered flag by Mike Briggs in the Opel Calibra. On the championship front, Dion Jubeir led the drivers' log by just 2 points from teammate Tony Viana, with Terry Moss back into third place. BMW were leading the Manufacturers' Championship, but were under severe pressure from Toyota and Volkswagen. After Sarel van der Merwe and the new Sb4 Cougar had dominated the 9th round of the Wesbank Challenge at Kyalami late in August, it was back to the coast for round 10. The fast and tricky East London circuit is also a favourite with drivers, with Mike Briggs giving the Opel Calibra its first pole position of the season. The Sb4 Cougar replaced the Ford Sapphire wrecked in the Goldfields Raceway accident and was immediately more than competitive. Van der Merwe crushed the opposition at Kyalami and was looking for a repeat. It didn't take Van der Merwe long to make his move. Racecam action shows how he steamed past the Terry Moss Rothmans Audi and set off after Briggs. The Opel was blisteringly quick in the straight line, but behind Van der Merwe there was more trouble for Moss. This time it was Ben Morgenrood who picked off the Audi. Apart from his 2 wins at Velcom, it had not been a happy season for Morgenrood, but he was really trying this time out. Championship leader Dion Jubeir was again out in front in Class B, but didn't have Tony Viana riding shotgun for him. The popular Viana was recovering from cancer surgery, and Jubeir was out on his own. There was drama up front when Van der Merwe came through ahead of Briggs. The Opel Calibra had once again shot its bolt and was heading for retirement. Class D Championship leader Richard Sorensen was once again having to contend with Steve Wyndham. Although nowhere as quick as the Class A and Class B cars, the Class D brigade were involved in a war of their own, with no holes barred. It may look like a drive through the park, but the Class D cars were capable of speeds in excess of 200 kilometers an hour. Sarel van der Merwe was in total control, but Terry Moss got himself all crossed up in a desperate bid to get back on terms with Ben Morgenrood. There was no stopping van der Merwe, who cruised home in the Sb4 Cougar. Three wins in 3 races with a new car was a feather in the Ford cap. With Van der Merwe in pole position for the start of the second heat, Terry Moss was hoping to put an end to the Ford Cougar's string of successes and needed to boost his championship chances. Van der Merwe was again out in front in the early stages. Behind the Class A cars, Johan Coetzee had taken control of Class B. Championship leader Dion Jubeir was battling with engine problems, but needed to soldier on and gather in pressure points. Surprise, surprise. In Class C, it was Damso versus Repsol once again, with Toyota Sprinter and Toyota Corolla separated only by meters. Out in front, Van der Merwe looked to be in control until flames belched from a blown turbo, and the Ford Cougar was parked on the side of the track, with the rest of the field steaming by. A light drizzle had made conditions a little tricky and almost caught out Class B leader Johan Coetzee in the Gear Max Nissan Skyline. The conditions did not unduly trouble Terry Moss in the four-wheel drive Rothmans Audi. With Dion Jubeir struggling with engine problems, Moss was setting about getting the championship challenge back on track. Moss came home to take his 7th victory of the season. More important from his point of view was that he was back in the championship race. Although with only 2 rounds remaining, Dion Jubeir still held the upper hand. In the Manufacturers' Championship, Toyota had moved to the top of the leaderboard, ahead of BMW and Volkswagen. The fairest Cape of them all and Kalani were the setting for the penultimate round of the Wesbank Challenge. Once again, it was to be a meeting packed with drama. Sadly, Tony Viana was once again missing, but was not forgotten by his fellow competitors. The meeting also saw the debut of the Audi Sb4 in the hands of former World Sports Car champion Hans Stuck.
I would say it's pretty high, you know, especially with guys like Sarah van der Merwe in the car, Terry Moss, Chris Aberdeen, Ben Morgenroth. Those are all tough guys you could fit easily into European Racing Series, and they'd be right there. There's no doubt about this. Just that in Europe we have more competitive drivers, which makes it a better field. But the standard of racing, the standard of the technique you'd have down here is much more higher than you would expect it to be.
Chris Aberdeen put the Repsol Audi in pole position. As the man in pole position, Aberdeen controlled the pace of the start. When the lights turned to green, an awful lot of horsepower was unleashed as the cars streamed into the first corner. The Class A field was the best assembled for many a long day in South Africa, and Killarney was packed to overflowing. In the early stages, it was Aberdeen leading from Stook, with everyone else in hot pursuit of the Audis. The only Audi of its kind in the world, the Sb4, is a South African development. The car makes use of technology gleaned from racing in Germany and the United States, and was built at the Audi Motorsport workshops in Newtonmade. Behind the high-speed Class A train, a tremendous duel had developed in Class B. The Nissan Skylines of Johan Coetzee and Larry Wolford were locked in battle with Dion Jubeir's BMW. And surprise, surprise, once again, Serge Damso and Dave Repsol were at it again in Class C. Repsol and Damso were side by side down the main straight, and the race cam from Damso's car supplies all the action. More race cam action as Hans Stuck makes his move to take the lead from Chris Aberdeen. While Stuck blasted his way into the lead, there were anxious faces in the Ford pit. Sarah van der Merwe had gone missing, and much to the delight of the fans, Supervan was walking back to the pits with the Ford Cougar parked out on the circuit. Back to the race cam and a bird's eye view as Terry Moss tangled with Class D backmarker Neil Duncliffe. Moss got going again, but the Audi suspension was a little deranged. The incident robbed Audi of a clean sweep, with Ben Morgenroth overhauling the stricken Rothmans car. It was consolation enough for Audi, with Stuck giving the Sb4 a maiden victory first time out, followed by Aberdeen in the Repsol car. It was smiles all around in the Audi pits, but the drama was not yet over. We pick up the start of Heat 2 from the race cam in Ben Morgenroth's Mazda 323. Hans Stuck led Chris Aberdeen into the first corner with a huge field trailing behind the Audis and the rest of the Class A cars. Morgenroth dropped a place early on when Terry Moss went past, but worse was to come with the Mazda 323 headed for retirement with engine trouble. With Dion Jubeir out with a blown engine, Johan Coetzee took charge of Class B. Larry Wolford went farming in the Sabat Nissan Skyline, and another dose of Damso versus Repsol ended when the Damso Toyota expired on the pit straight with a blown engine. Out in front, Stuck had opened up a commanding lead and was being chased by Moss and Aberdeen when the Class A versus Class D controversy reared its head again. Moss and Aberdeen went either side of Richard Sorensen, with Aberdeen clipping the curb and ripping out the underbelly of the Repsol car. What followed was mayhem, with cars sliding around all over the place on the Audi's oil. Mike Briggs was almost punted up the backside as he rejoined the fray. Let's take a look at the incident through the race cam in the Sorensen car. Stuck goes past the Golf without any problem, and then all hell lets loose up ahead of Sorensen. Moss and Aberdeen go past, and Aberdeen hits the curb. Watch as Sorensen suddenly hits the Audi's oil, with Briggs suffering the same fate and spinning across the Golf's bows.
you're coming out of a corner, you've got to stay on the ideal line. That's racing, you know, and we have a race, and they've got to appreciate that as well. So while I didn't do anything consistent, I did stick to my racing line. I didn't move over to make room for them.
The rule says keep to the inside, so I presumed he was going to keep I went for the outside. He then pointed to the inside. Already I'd committed myself to the outside. Went over a curb and destroyed the car.
Audi's chances of a 1-2-3 result had gone up in smoke, but Hans Stuck gave the new Sb4 its second win of the day. Moss finished second to Stuck, but it was back in the championship race. Jubeir only scored points in the first heat, and Moss had a mathematical chance of taking the title at the last event. On the manufacturer's side, Toyota were virtually assured of the championship. The curtain came down on the Wesbank Challenge at the Yellow Pages Summer Challenge meeting at Kyalami on October the 31st. The championship was a straight fight between Dion Jubeir and Terry Moss, with Audi fielding 4 cars for Moss, Chris Aberdeen, Graham Duxbury and Hans Stuck. As it was, it turned out to be a day of disaster for the Moss and the Audi team. For Sarel van der Merwe, 2 wins completed a satisfactory season for the veteran superstar.
We've won as many as anybody else. I think I've won 7 and 30 as well up to now. But we've had more mechanical problems than other people, and I was also taken out by the Audis more than other people.
2 sensible drives in the BMW 535 clinched the overall Wesbank title for Dion Jubeir. Jubeir showed great maturity when Tony Viana was hospitalised.
You know, that sort of thing you just sort of live with, because it's the same. I just try and take each race as it comes, without too much thought of where I actually am in the championship and what would happen if I won or didn't win, you know. You just try and do each race as it comes.
Class C champion Dave Repsol spent much of his season locked in battle with Serge
I've become much quicker since he's been on the scene, and it's costing a lot more money, I promise you that. And that's it, he's a hard man to beat, but we'll see next year.
For Class D champion Richard Sorensen, the season ended in a Kyalami wall.
I had a pretty good string of results early in the season, but then Wyndham came in the Toyota and he's gone a lot quicker towards the end of the season, beaten me a couple of times, but basically through consistency I've been able to score enough points to become champion before this final event. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Terry Moss's overall championship hopes disappeared with the first heat spin, but he took the Class A title.
For me, it was a learning curve. I mean, I started in modifieds last year. I've been pushing hard, and I think I found the limits of the cars. And from now on, I think I've just got to sit in, settle down, and I reckon I've matured in Wesbank modified.
It was a bitter disappointment for Moss, but the flag came down on the 1992 Wesbank Challenge season with a double win for Sarel van der Merwe and the Sassel Ford Cougar. A triumph for overall championship winner Dion Jubeir, who finished 18 points ahead of Terry Moss. Third went to Chris Aberdeen, Sarel van der Merwe was 4th and Ben Morgenrud 5th. In the Manufacturers' Championship, Toyota cruised home with just 1 point separating BMW and Volkswagen in the battle for 2nd and 3rd.